A couple of days ago, more than 50 Amazon workers walked out at the Shakopee Amazon warehouse overnight after management revealed additional cases of the COVID-19 virus and continued with the policy of firing worker leaders. Last month, nearly the exact same situation landed Amazon into hot water and into the headlines. In March, Amazon fired the warehouse worker Chris Smalls after he led a walkout at a distribution warehouse in New York. Amazon claims they fired him for violating a 14-day company-imposed quarantine after he came into contact with an employee who tested positive for the coronavirus. Small says he was being punished after pleading with management to sanitize the warehouse and be more open about workers who fell ill. The multi-billion-dollar company, ran by the world's richest man's response to this was to take coordinated action to smear Smalls, calling him not smart or articulate, as part of a media strategy to make him the face of the entire union and organization movement. Joining us to discuss is activist and former Amazon worker Chris Smalls. Also, I want to thank my subscriber, Cyrus Reza, for helping us make the connection with Chris Smalls. Chris, how are you today? Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Cabin fever, but we're doing okay. So did I describe the story correctly? Is there anything you'd like to add to the way I described in the introduction?
You got it, but elaborate on it if you would like me to. Beginning of March, there was major safety concerns at my warehouse in Staten Island. There were no cleaning supplies. There were no facial masks provided. There was no PPE provided. The cleaning crew wasn't showing up to work because they were scared themselves. The employees around me, my colleagues, they began to fall sick. Flu-like symptoms. A lot of them were calling out. They were vomiting at their workstations. They were fatigued. They couldn't finish their 10-hour work shift. And a domino effect. So it was very alarming to me as a supervisor to see that happening around me. So what I did was try to raise my concerns to my local HR department, the higher ups. That entire week I was there and nothing happened. They pretty much swept it under the rug. They were nonchalant to their response because we didn't have any confirmed cases. So that forced me to take further action. And I sent out emails to the health department, the CDC, the government of New York, to get the building closed down and quarantine because I wanted to be proactive instead of reactive. At the end of the week, that's when they targeted me. They quarantined only me just to silence me. They didn't quarantine none of my employees that were exposed to my colleague who tested positive for 10 hours a day, multiple days in a row. They didn't even quarantine the person that I ride to work with every single day. So that tells you right there that it had a target on my back. And, I mobilized a walkout on March 30th. It was successful. About 50 to 60 people walked out. Voices were heard. And I put Amazon on notice. But 2 hours later, that's when I was terminated.
Wow. And I'm curious, when you found out, I would imagine you found out about the leaked documents at the same time everyone else did. When you found out that Amazon, this multi-billion-dollar company that pays no federal taxes with the world's richest man, who was, by the way, on that phone call where the leaked documents came out of, what were you thinking when you realized these guys were actually going to have a PR campaign to attack you as the face of the labor movement and is somehow unsafe and articulate all of these other smears?
Honestly, I was saying thank you because now we know who these people are, who Jeff Bezos have around him. In that room, we know what type of conversations they have. And we know that they don't care about their employees, and they also validated the fact that I was speaking truth to power. For them to even hold a meeting like that and to discuss smearing me, that tells you that what I was speaking out about on March 30th had some truth to it, and it was intimidating to them. So that's just my response. It's never going to be Amazon versus Chris Smalls. It's going to be Amazon versus the people. So they can try all they want, but I'm not going to fall for that trap. It was never about me. It was about the health and safety concerns of all the employees nationwide.
Let me ask you this. We hear a lot about the difficulties of working at Amazon, meaning it's a difficult job, it's a hard job. The company puts a huge amount of stress and pressure on the employees that work at these various warehouses. Can you give us an idea of what it's like to work at one of those warehouses and how that changed with the COVID-19 virus?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I've been with the company since 2015. And I tell everybody that gets hired with the company, when I usually introduce myself as their supervisor, I tell them, like, you got to prepare yourself mentally and physically to work here. If you have a gym membership, you might want to cancel it. These buildings are massive. My building in particular, 900,000 square feet, 14 NFL football fields. I pretty much walked across the globe a few times working there. So, a lot of miles on your legs, and you stand up for 10 hours a day, sometimes 12 hours a day. So you have to prepare yourself physically and mentally. You have to go home. You have to eat, good food. You can't, take care of your health. You have to get plenty of rest, drink plenty of water, and just make sure that you're prepared for 10 hours of calisthenics. That's exactly what it is. I don't sugarcoat anything about working there. If you're able to do that, you were able to last there. This company is a high turnover company. That's what they do. They hire and fire all the time, 24/7, 365. This company does not stop. That's what separates Amazon from its competitors. So, my advice there is just, you got to be mentally tough and then physically as well.
Wow. Bob, you have to deal with basically making up the shortfall for people who can't necessarily make ends meet. And so you have also been in the activism front and the organizer front. How you've had to deal with, I would imagine, pressures of trying to get people organized. How have you had to deal with that? Meaning, how did you get people together in order to push back against something that was unfair, this kind of pushing back on power?
Yeah, I mean, this stuff's really scary, too. I mean, you got to remember, I'm a tall, white male in America. I'm the most privileged of privilege, where I'm not politicized and my body's not politicized. Me talking out and speaking out against a police officer, the chief of police, or the mayor of a city is one thing. If you're a person of color or any minority community or marginalized community, vulnerable community, however you want to label it, you have a huge target on your back, and workers, low-income workers, are one of those targets. They don't have the same protection. So I definitely want to first preface that my organizing experience comes around being in a privileged class here in the United States and takes a lot of that pressure off of me. The other thing I really think of is what Chris was saying. The wear and tear on people's bodies is incredible. I think of Uber delivery bike riders here in Washington, D.C. I mean, you're biking to make minimum wage 8-9 hours a day. You tear up your body, and these major corporations are not offering health care. They're not offering long-term support or retirement packages to say, hey, thanks for walking miles on end every day. And 15 years from now, you'll have a pension that you can check into, at least to be able to make sure you have health care for any of those problems that you may have had on the company dime. That doesn't exist. There is no network for these people. And for people like you, Chris, it seems like the corporations are able to erode the living standards, the home standards that people have by basically pushing wealth to the largest luxury owners of apartments and condominiums and big houses. You have less food resources in poor communities, healthcare obviously at a premium here in the country. So even to be able to organize and mobilize people, Chris, beyond the workplace, you're also coming up against the fact that so many people lack the adequate resources in their day-to-day lives outside of the workplace to then be able to come to a workplace and activate and unionize and fight the powers there. It just seems like a lot to be done.
Absolutely. This is a matter of life and death, and I think this is more of the reason why people are encouraged to speak up. What I did started a revolution. That's why there's been multiple walkouts over the past couple of weeks. You mentioned the one that happened in Minneapolis. I spoke to her yesterday. She called my phone immediately for support, and I fully support what she did. And it won't be the last, until these companies really own up to what they're doing to people out here. We're going to continue to speak up, and that's what I'm fighting for every single day.
I'm curious what that solidarity looks like there as other people reach out to you. Do you see a growing movement taking place And how are you all communicating? You mentioned their phone call, but is it mostly just people being inspired by reading the news, or is there a lot of behind the scenes solidarity building happening?
There's a lot behind the scenes. I'm glad you brought it up because
they're listening. They're all listening now, so don't tell us too much, obviously.
I formed a whole alliance. I've been working day in and day out, communicating with people, not just nationwide, but internationally, also other countries as well. I have conference calls every week with multiple buildings. I'm talking about 40, 50, sometimes 60 buildings on the line on Zoom. And we've been communicating. We all on the same accord. Everybody that's been terminated by the company over the past couple of weeks, we all formed together. We communicate. We support one another. And it's a beautiful thing with coming out of this because on May 1st, now that you bring it up, May 1st, I'm mobilizing an international walkout that involves all the buildings that I communicate with. And it's about at least 65 to 75 buildings that be participating. And not only just Amazon, but I got other companies to buy in as well. I got people from Whole Foods, Target, Walmart, and FedEx as well stand with us. Also Instacart. They're also going to be standing with us on May 1st. We're going to actually mobilize an international walkout. We formed an alliance, and the press release will be out tomorrow morning.
May Day. It's funny. In the United States, they moved May Day into like September or something in order to disassociate it from the international workers movement. Isn't that wild? I'm curious. Do you think that this is going to be a new normal going forward in regards to not just wildcat strikes, but where workers identify a certain value in themselves, and in identifying that value in themselves, have a minimum standard that they are going to allow themselves to be treated at these companies going forward? Meaning, is this a new normal, or is this going to go back to same old at some point?
I don't think life is ever going to be the same after this pandemic. We were exposed on many levels as a country, for these companies, these billionaires, these CEOs, even for the working class citizens. It's a 20th century revolution, and it started already. This is just the beginning, and I don't believe that this should ever happen again to frontliners or first responders, where we walk into a pandemic and we're unprotected, unprepared. So I think this time around, everybody should be forming together and for change, for our future generations. I want my children to grow up in a society where, their rights are protected, and their employee rights are protected as well.
Totally agree with you. But how do you do that on a grand scale? Because that's always the dilemma, right? I mean, I give you a perfect example. When Donald Trump was trying to build the wall, and he was perfectly willing to basically not pay airline workers for months on end, meaning most people live paycheck to paycheck. These people aren't out there balling. And Donald Trump basically said, yeah, for political stunt, I am okay with those people not getting paid. Astonishing, right? Same thing with us. In the middle of a pandemic, you have a situation where the government itself basically, Nancy Pelosi, my producer, just put up the article, they're not coming back to Washington. Meaning, Nancy Pelosi has all the capabilities in the world to put out policy to go against what what Trump is doing, but she's not going to do it because basically they're funded by the same people. I guess what I'm trying to get at is how does it become a more organized, pressing resistance that is not just a singular company or two companies, but it becomes kind of a worker solidarity issue as opposed to these wildcat strikes?
Absolutely. I mean, this is towards that direction. The alliance that we're forming on May 1st has never been done before. You got to think all these major companies, these are all competitors pretty much in the retail industry and the grocery department industry as well. These are competitors, and your employees are saying, forget about that. This is about us, about the people. We represent the people of America and all the communities. So when we decide to take the power back, that's exactly what we have to do. If these politicians and these governments are not going to listen to us, then it's our job to come together and take the power back. It may be a slow process, but like I said, this pandemic is the real culprit. This virus is the one that's dictating which direction we take and how it's defining our country. And I believe that if we all come together right now in solidarity, and we continue to protest and fight back whenever things are not right, eventually we'll get to some type of common ground. So that's all we could just hope for in the future. I'm taking everything day to day and week by week. But I do see the bigger picture when there's some type of rank and file committee or organization or coalition that's able to unify the workforce, at least for the Amazon perspective. That's what we need. Obviously, the CEO dropped the ball, and there's other companies that are doing the same. So if it's not a union that's going to be able to do it, then the employees should be able to choose and pick their rank and file committee and be able to dictate how their demands are met. So that's what I'm aiming for, short term, and then we'll figure out the long term.
Excellent.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I completely agree. I think there needs to be a movement outside of the electoral space. I think that's where movements go to die. And that will be really interesting to see if the electoral system here in America tries to co-opt the movement whatsoever. And it seems like they're pretty open and honest in Washington, D.C. at the federal level. They have no interest in the worker, and they're not even going to try to placate them with anything beyond a $1,200 check getting to some people. And it's especially difficult if you're unemployed. And so, Chris, will be really interesting there to see, is there an economic movement that comes out of this? Is it a social movement? What will be the movement that arises? Because we're going to be in this COVID-19 stay-at-home process at least for the next 3 months, if not for a year and a half, until there's a vaccine. So it'll be really interesting to see what rises. I don't think there will be an electoral movement at first. I think any pressure that comes on the system, it will come from individuals like Chris Smalls. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit more about how people can support you and your efforts.
Absolutely. Please follow me on Twitter, _down Amazon, on Instagram, Chris.Smalls_. We have a GoFundMe page as well. You can Google it. Google Chris Smalls GoFundMe. This money that I'm raising is for all the underlying health conditions of the employees that haven't been to work in over a month up until present date. I'm raising money for them. Since the richest man in the world won't do it, somebody got to do it. So please support us and follow me.
Chris, thank you so much. Shout out to all of those folks out there fighting Amazon. This obviously goes back to the fight against the second headquarters. So there's quite a bit of movement against the company that hopefully continues to crescendo. That was Chris Smalls. Chris, thanks again for joining us. With that, we